Once you set up your offshore plan, how do you maintain it so you don't have more problems every month and every year? In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. I'm Andrew Henderson, and when a business owner comes to me and says, Andrew, I want to, let's say, reduce my tax. I'm paying a lot of money in the United States. I want to be a nomad capitalist. I want to reduce that amount of money. They can often save hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And I say, well, let's have a plan. You can't just go out and set up a company here and then keep fighting through each step. I say we need to look at it like a complete puzzle where all the different things involved, maybe 5, 10, 15 different elements, all come together. And they said, that's great. But then the question comes up, how do I maintain all of that? Am I going to have a problem? Is something going to break down? And the simple answer is yes. There are going to be some maintenance requirements. If you've got a company, for example, there's going to be some renewal fees every year. In some cases, you may have to file an audit. And part of the planning process for me is figuring out, do you want a company where you get some additional benefits, but there is an audit? Do you want to not do an audit, but maybe there's a few other things you have to think about? Everyone's plan is going to be different. But how do you avoid problems? People look at it like, if I have a plan with lots of moving parts, it's kind of like having a car with lots of moving parts, and eventually things are going to break down. But the reality is, it's like a car in the sense that there's maintenance. You have that annual audit. You have to keep books and records in some cases. You have to make sure that all the forms that you need to file are filed to avoid the problems. That's what makes it legal. But in terms of problems, I look at it instead like an airplane. There's a great YouTube channel with a guy, Bedros, and he gives the example of the 747 has a great pilot, it's barreling down the runway, it takes off, and then it pretty much runs on autopilot. As long as the first parts were done correctly, you get the plane out, you get to 36,000 feet, and you just cruise, knowing that in case something goes wrong, there's someone there to intervene. There are things that come up where people who have less than ideal plans do have problems. I had a guy call me, made a whole video about it, where he said, Andrew, I had this company in one of these random little islands, and I had a great bank account in Singapore, and the bank sent me a letter saying, we're closing your account, we no longer want companies from this place. I have other people who have run into problems because they set up the company, they transferred their assets from one company to the new offshore company, but they didn't do the tax planning right in their own country, and so then they had a problem. The reality is, the structural foundation of your plan is what's most important. If you do that properly, you can get it up to 36,000 feet, and you can pretty much let it go on autopilot as long as you have the people who can step in case something does change. The biggest issues that I see that people are worried about is the bank going to close my account? The issue there is making sure that you're setting up your company in a way that's favorable to the banks, in the way that they like, in the way that they understand, in the way that makes sense to them. They're bankers. They don't understand high-flying tax strategies or any of that. They just want to know, how is the company set up? And increasingly, if you're setting up a company in some tiny island like the Seychelles or in the Marshall Islands or something like that, banks don't really like that. They're worried about risk. They're worried about the kind of people who had set up a company in an island where there's no requirements whatsoever. You pay them $100 a year, they let you do whatever you want. So yes, that Marshall Islands company may work on paper, but if you need a bank account, a lot of banks are going to be suspicious of that. You may not get a bank at all, or you may get a bank that's less interesting or has higher fees or has more requirements or is just more difficult to deal with. And a lot of banks from HSBC to others have started de-risking where they're getting rid of these accounts for these little IBCs. A lot of people come into creating their plan with the idea of wanting total anonymity, wanting the ability to do whatever they want, and instead if you just do a little bit of paperwork and you file a few forms and you handle things properly like a normal company, you can get all the benefits of tax and freedom and all of that, but you're also going to get the benefits of being able to run an ongoing company. And so when it comes to banking, generally banks don't change that much. You want to create an infrastructure that they're going to like, and you want to be able to look forward and make sure that your bank account's not just going to be open for 6 months, but that once you start doing transactions, the bank is going to like your transactions. The bank is going to start to understand the patterns that you're dealing in, to where you're not just going to be receiving random amounts of money that are going to cause them to, perk up and say, well, hold on, what's going on? Maybe we don't want this customer. So if you set up the bank account properly, set up the company properly, understand what the particular bank or banks that you're going with are going to want and are going to expect of you, then you can normally be in good shape. And if you build redundancies, as I would, to where you have 2 or 3 accounts, you'll make sure that no matter what happens, you're always going to be in good shape, and you have a plan for how you want to run your company and how you want to run your banking. People also ask about, what if the tax law changes? Recently, in the United States, big tax law, Trump tax reform changed, and the way that offshore companies work for U.S. citizens and residents changed. And this is where, for 31 years, nothing changed. For 31 years, we used the same system of legal tax reduction. But then Trump tax reform came in and we had to make some changes. I remember being just on the street from here last Christmas Eve, and sending everyone who had a company an email saying, hey, here are your 4 different options of how you can comply with this. Here is how you can make sure that you're not going to be caught with a problem. And people said, hey, I want to do number 1, or hey, I want to do number 2, or hey, I want to do number 4, or whatever the case may be. There was someone who was aware of the situation. So having the right professionals involved, having the right tax person, having the right accounting person, having the right general contractor who oversees things, makes sure that when a law changes, you're aware. But I also think people overestimate, 31 years went by in the United States and they hadn't changed any laws. Now they changed the law, and it's probably going to be a long time before the law surrounding this issue changes. When you go to places like Hong Kong, when you go to some of the islands, when you go to places where you would set up a company, their laws may be changing even less frequently. There may be little procedural changes if you deal with an audit or deal with an accounting every year, but on an overall basis, these things don't change that often. I think that what people expect is every 6 months or every year they're going to have to be changing something. What I try and do is look at, what are the trends? Right now, banking in Europe, for example, in the European Union, a lot of those banks don't want companies unless someone is physically running it from the EU. They just don't want some Hong Kong company with a guy living in Thailand banking in the EU, or banking in Switzerland, or banking in Liechtenstein. That concerns them. And so if I read the tea leaves and I have a guy who's running a very small business and just wants to have an account with some money going in and out, I might say, you know what, even if you can get this account now, it might not work 12 months or 24 months from now. Let's just set it up a different way so that we know that this plan is future-proofed. So really the bottom line for maintaining your plan, maintaining your structure is, number 1, understanding what the paperwork requirements are. And going in, if we plan for what kind of paperwork you're comfortable with, then we'll give you a paperwork burden that you can handle every year to make sure things are maintained. But the number 2 issue is making sure the foundation is solid. If the foundation is solid, if you get a good running car, if you get the Bentley with the 5-year maintenance free, you're not going to be having to do much besides just doing the oil changes, filing your little forms. If you buy a clunker, if you buy a 1999 Kia and you're driving it around, there may be one day you just go and it doesn't start, it doesn't turn on. So the issue is, buy a car, buy a plan, buy a foundation that's reliable. Keep an eye on it every once in a while, but don't worry about it too much. Just make sure that things are not changing. Make sure that your plan is going to continue to work and that it's not going to change 3 months from now. And if you do that, and if you build that solid foundation, you'll be off and running with very few problems. I'm Andrew Henderson, and if you're looking for a way to legally reduce your taxes, build your freedom, and create wealth faster as a global citizen, then you've come to the right place. I want you to do 3 things right now. Number 1, click the button to subscribe to our channel. Make sure to get notifications so you never miss a new video. Number 2, get a copy of our #1 best-selling book, Nomad Capitalist, on Amazon, and learn all of the dozens of benefits of our lifestyle. And number 3, if you're already a 6 or 7-figure entrepreneur and you want to put these strategies in place, go to nomadcapitalist.com and find out how to get some help.